Tisha!
Hi, please tell me you can hear me now.
Yes, we
Can
can
you
hear
hear
you.
me?
We can hear you. Yes.
Okay, cool. So sorry about that. Port Dixon Wi-Fi isn't the best. So it's kind of ratchet. The reason why on my actually no, I should not be using the word ratchet. Just learned that it's actually not. It's a word that is specific to the experiences of Black communities. I really need to unlearn that, but learning is a continuous process. To explain what's happening here, I am outside my apartment because here is the best signal. So we're working with it. Okay, cool. Before I start my story, disclosure, I am a coconut, which means that I am brown on the outside, white on the inside, which is also another way to say that I cannot speak Tamil to save my life, but can speak it very well if I need to get away from a creepy guy at the club. So here's my story. Okay, also this is pre MCO lah. Okay. Because my favorite hairdresser was closed, so my only option was this Malay barber and an Indian barber, and they were right next to each other. Usually I go to either a Malay or a Chinese barber because someone like me going to an Indian barber is dangerous territory. I'm non-binary, but I am presenting, and frankly, if you are just not a cishet man, nah, right? But to get to the Malay barber, I have to walk past the Indian barber, and to add to the betrayal that I was committing, sat two uncles, and I mean like uncle lah, white singlet, wearing like lungi, the whole thing, and they are just staring at me. They stare as I walk past, and I didn't have to say anything. They knew that I was going to the Malay barber. And, I'm thinking, I'm an independent person. I have the right to choose. So I muster my inner Rani and made no eye contact and just walked to the Malay barber shop, opened the door, and there's this young guy in the middle of shaving this other guy's head, and he looks up at me and he just kind of freezes a little, and he just goes like, yeah, napa? And I'm like, oh, nak buat nombor dua boleh? And then silence. And then he goes, oh, sorry ya kak, saya tak boleh potong rambut perempuan. And okay, side note, this happened when I still identified as a woman. And who would have thunk that the only time a person would actually get my gender right was when I was being denied of something for having said gender, but it's fine. Anyway, he says, oh, saya tak boleh potong rambut perempuan. And I'm like, okay, ada orang yang boleh potong tak? And he was hesitant. And he goes like, oh, ya, ada kawan tapi dia keluar sekarang. And I'm like, okay, boleh saya tunggu tak? And the thing is, like, I already knew the answer to this, but I'm not going to do the walk of shame back to the Indian barber, like, what am I going to say when the uncle asked what I was expecting when I went there in the first place? Okay, because number one, I've had really good experience with Malay barbers, and two, clearly I have some internalized trauma about cis-het Indian men from my personal family history, which is probably why there are all these toxic behaviors that I've internalized, which I'm constantly trying to break down so that I may be more present and loving in my relationships. But also, more importantly, I do not know how to say any of these things in Tamil to him. So try not to, right? But either way, he reluctantly says no, and I'm like, okay. So I U-turn, I do the walk of shame, right? Pass by the two uncles and they continue to stare. And then once I get in, this is when the biggest challenge happens, right? Because I have to tell the barber what I want to do with my hair. Right, so the entire time I'm trying to like muster every bit of Tamil that I know. I'm like counting down like numbers and wonder and I'm like, hey, can I go all the way up to 10? I'm thinking about the Tamil that I learned in kindergarten, all the Tamil I spoke with my grandmother, which wasn't really Tamil. It was like Tamil, English, Malay, fusion, something. Very one Malaysia though. But yeah, and I'm just like thinking like, I'm praying, and I do not know what it was. Maybe it was Mariaman, because she was nicely framed on the top of like the mirror. Maybe it was Mariaman, maybe my ancestors used to pity in me. When the barber asked what I wanted, I looked Pinala Muna. Where the fuck that came from, right? But anyway, passed, he looked at me, he nodded, he moved, like ushered me to the chair. I sat down and I was just like, okay, that wasn't too bad, right? And like I just kept thinking, when I sat there, like about my coconutness, and how it relates to this barbershop, because this barbershop is quite new, but it was designed like how all Indian barbershops would have been. Like nothing has changed. It's a huge mirror that stretches from one corner to the other. It's a wooden table, there's all the brushes, the chair, the oils, and it's always very spare. It's like the design itself is a relic. Here I am cutting my hair in a place where my forefathers cut their hair. I mean, not literally, but in spirit. And like I'm just like trying to keep it cool, given that I just passed for like speaking Tamil, and I'm like just seeing them like, yeah, this is completely natural. I am completely natural, right? And then he asked me if I am working or if I'm studying. Normally, I would say I am studying. I said padiki because I do not know how to say I'm working in Tamil, but also because it's just a lot to say. And then the only question they would ever ask you if you do say that you study is where you study, of which I can just say KL and it's done. Which he did ask and I said it was KL and it was that, right? And yeah, and so like I'm sitting there, and I'm thinking like actually it's kind of ironic. It's kind of ironic that as someone who does a lot of work with identity, who does a lot of work about uncovering my family history, uncovering my queer identity, that I cannot speak the very language that actually holds it. And it was intentional. My parents taught me that if we ever learned Tamil, if my sisters and I learned how to speak it, then we would mix with the other Tamil kids in the neighborhood, and that would mean we would be sent back to the estates. Like, speaking Tamil was a sign of privilege and class. And also an erasure. Language is access, language is history. And to uncover all that history, you could say that maybe my entire life's work is to kind of compensate for that loss of belonging, right? And so I'm just like, I'm sitting there thinking about this, and that's when the barber starts putting the oil, right? And so for those of you who have gone to an Indian barber, they have the Ayurvedic treatment, right? And the thing is, I always thought, like, I thought you would have to, if you were to request for it, then only they'll do it to you. Also because at the time that I identify as a woman, that he wouldn't actually do it for me, but here he was, like, he started putting this oil, and I strangely felt really safe. For the first time, I felt like I actually was meant to be here. I was rooted. I felt grounded and present. And like in this wondrous moment of peace and feeling, he grabs my head, yanks it to one side, yanks it to the other. I swear to God, that scene like from Black Panther, when he like goes into heaven and there's all like these stars, and then he like sees his like dead father and shit like that. I swear to God, I like went there. I saw my grandfather, I saw my grandmother. They're all like staring at me and they're like, Vesha, say these words. And I turned to the barber and I said, Uncle, Yevelo. And he tells me 20, I give him the money and I walk out as if like I am a full-fledged Indian, brown on the outside, brown on the inside, no doubt about it. And that was the first time I felt like an Indian. That was the one time and it never happened ever again. But yeah, that's my story. Yeah. I've not gone back to the barber shop actually since then. It's too much.